Please welcome, with ideas about innovation, entrepreneurship, and her passion for learning, Rapelang Rabana.
Good morning, everyone. I guess everyone's loving their tea and still drinking. Thank you so much for coming today, and I'm really, really honored to be speaking with you today, mostly because I think my journey from graduating from UCT to being acknowledged by people like the World Economic Forum and Forbes has been quite unconventional. And while I'm a guest speaker and a keynote speaker, I'm supposed to chat to you about my journey. I also want to talk to you about something I'm very passionate about, learning and skills development, particularly on the African continent, because I want you to be able to walk away with something that you can think about and apply in your own organizations. So taking a step back and looking at my own journey, after university in 2005, I co-founded my first business with my classmates. Frustrated by the high telecommunications costs, we thought we could create a world where voice telephony and messaging on mobile phones was cheaper on the internet. As students, things were always really, really expensive. We still use please call me's a lot. We would send like one please call me to say meet me at 5 o'clock, and two please call me's meant meet me at 6 o'clock instead. And we thought that the world could be a lot more different than that. And so we developed some of the earliest voice over IP applications on mobile phones back in the time before Android and iPhone. If you can remember a time when mobile phones, the smartest ones were Windows Mobile and Symbian Nokia phones, it was way back then. To me, that's the transformative and leveling and inclusive power of the internet, that a group of young UCT students sitting in a little apartment in Cape Town were able to develop world-class software just by having access to the internet. We literally Googled our way to success, and Jaeger was acquired by Telfree in 2009. That was a transformative experience for me that has forever shaped my world and made me even more dedicated to how we use mobile and internet technology to solve major socio-economic challenges at scale. My most recent venture is Rekindle Learning, where I'm really looking at how we improve the learning efficiencies and how we build capabilities better for the future in corporate environments as well as academic environments. We're working with companies in Botswana, South Africa, and Kenya. You're going to hear a lot in your sessions with the Symposium, I suppose, about how technology in the digital wave is affecting so many industries and so many areas of our lives. I feel that we haven't seen enough progress on the learning and development side, and that's what I want to focus on today. We all know about the challenges and the skills deficit on the African continent. Learning in schools in particular is very challenging. Learners, as of 2012, only 35% were literate. The World Economic Forum has indicated that skills and development are some of the key challenges facing Africa today, as said by business and civic leaders across the continent. The reason I became an entrepreneur and how I decide what kind of businesses I build is always deeply related to the kinds of things that I experienced as a child or growing up, and whatever life experiences and perspectives I developed there. So even in my interest here and with Rekindle Learning, it relates to that and my own schooling days. While I had a great educational experience by any measure, I still noticed deficiencies back then. I'm sure not everyone here can easily remember that school days, but for those of you who can't, I hope you can think about this through your children. So while I had a really great education, I started to spot some inefficiencies. So we'd get to school and we'd do these tests, and the teacher would give you back this test script, and you look at the answers that you got wrong, and you kind of promise yourself, I'll come back to them later on. And some of the things you were lucky to get right, and you knew they were flukes, and you told yourself, I'll come back to that too. But in the reality, it never, ever happened. It was too much to keep up with, so year to year, you go from one year to the next, reinforcing the things you were good at and leaving the things behind that you weren't good at. When I started tutoring in Guletu, one of the townships outside Cape Town, I started to see that these inefficiencies were exacerbated in resource-constrained schools. What happened there is that these learners got to school fine, they were taught reasonably well, but when they did a test, they would often only get a test mark back. So they wouldn't know for sure what they got wrong or even what they got right. So for me, it's a clear indication that there is no closed feedback loop, and that completely undermines that learning process. While there are certainly many, many factors in our schools that affect learning, we seem to let the most obvious problems persist. This contributes to a huge and growing population of young people that have lots of potential, but aren't ready for work because they aren't equipped with the knowledge and skills to be able to do so. And this is making our pool of young people shallower and shallower. At this point, you can say, it's really messed things up for us. But the reality is that problems and how we train and build people persist into business as well. Some of the statistics say that $60 billion in the United States is spent on training and development, yet only 30% of that knowledge is retained. That's a $42 billion wastage. Other statistics, 12 months after training, most employees are only applying 7% of what they learned. That's some pretty shocking statistics. And why is this solution so ineffective? The reasons aren't actually news. We've all known about them before, yet we persist on training and learning the same way we've always done. We go with these long training workshops, these 5, 10-day, 25-day training workshops, and create cognitive overload for staff by trying to get them to remember all of these things that they have no chance of remembering. This leads us to a little problem called the forgetting curve, and how most of us forget most new information. Without ongoing reinforcement and consolidation, we forget 70% of what we were taught in a classroom environment. Outside of the actual methodologies, the world we live in has also changed. The average job retention is now only 2 years. So all these inefficient methods that we use to train will probably only get someone to competency in those 2 years, and then they leave. I love how companies fashionably refer to people as their greatest asset. But when we compare it to other assets in our companies, our properties, our fleets, and hardware systems, can we really say that we haven't underutilized our people assets? The nail in the coffin, though, is that we like to believe that everything HR and people-related is HR's problem. Certainly not the CIO's problem, not my division's problem, and it's HR's problem, and we relegate it to that and deprioritize it in an organization environment. But the bottom line is, if there's people in the sales team that are ineffective, it's a sales problem. If the technology in your organization is not capacitating people to be able to be at their most productive, it's a business problem. The sooner we get people to competency, the better it is to all of us. Let's look at this productivity curve. If I was to come and work in your company today, how long do you think it will take me to get to that point where I cross that x-axis of zero value and start adding more value than I cost you? It'll differ depending on each industry and job role. But the point is that if we were using more effective learning methods, we could dramatically cut that time and avoid all of that lost value. Quantifying that lost value is something we try to avoid doing. But let's say I was a customer service agent and I earned 11,000 rands a month. Over a year, if it takes me that long to get competent, that's over 130,000 rands lost. And if I was higher up the salary scale, it gets worse and worse. Yet we keep overlooking these problems. The faster we capacitate people, the more they can add value. It makes business sense. And there are better ways to do things. My decision to become an entrepreneur had very little to do with liking business or finance or numbers or anything like that. It was a mindset shift that is really accessible to anyone, whether you're in a big company or starting your own venture. It dawned upon me sometime before the end of university that life as we know it isn't quite as it seems. Growing up as a child, you kind of assumed, or you had the impression, that everything around you that is life was kind of how it's supposed to be, and was made up by parents or the people who knew better or some omnipotent power, and this is just how it was supposed to be. and you just had to go along with the flow, work hard, make a bit of effort, and try not to bump against this elusive structure called life. At the end of university, for me, that meant getting a job. And I decided against that because I reached one simple yet very powerful realization. I realized that everyone, absolutely everyone, is winging it. And everyone is taking their first shot at life. Everyone is trying to figure it out too. And there isn't some omnipotent power that has all of the wisdom. Steve Jobs says it best with the words, "Everything around you that you call life was created by someone no smarter than you. And you can influence it." Shake off this erroneous notion that life is there and you're just going to live in it, versus embrace it, change it, make your mark upon it. So at 22, I knew that the things that aren't working don't have to be like that, and we don't have to face these telecommunications costs. We imagined a world of internet-based messaging and calls long before it arrived in 2006, and now things like Viber and Facebook messaging and WhatsApp are common. Today, I know something else. I know that the human wastage that we continue to allow by not capacitating people faster need not be the case at all. There are always better ways to do things if we're open-minded to it. And we'll realize that once we start doing things that way, we can't even remember a time when we didn't do it that way. And today I'm asking you to be more open to that idea. There's an awesome organization called Fun Theory, where they spend all that time trying to find better ways to do things. We're going to watch a video now where they show us how simple it is to try to get people to use stairs instead of escalators all the time. I hope that's convinced you that there really are always better ways to do things. When the internet first came out, we didn't really know quite what to do with it. So companies in building their websites generally just put their print brochures online, and we had those pretty horrible websites back in the day. Eventually, we started to realize that we could actually change how we did things altogether, and we started to appreciate what the digital medium could do. And now it's affected so many things that we do. How we get around using GPS, how we meet people professionally and socially, how we audit our businesses, and how we shop. But HR and training and learning and development is pretty much still stuck in the stone ages of when those websites first came out. You see, we're still excited about just putting stuff online. We put PowerPoints on SharePoint, PDFs online, and we call it e-learning. And we haven't really changed at all the efficiency of how we learn. And that's really what the next step that's missing is. In starting Rekindle Learning, I wanted to reconnect with that ultimate goal of learning. It wasn't meant to be a checkbox exercise of I went on 2 days of training. Rather, it was meant to be an opportunity to embed knowledge and build expertise so that we could operate as our best selves and reach higher levels of productivity. While technology can't apply to all areas of learning, there's 2 particular areas that I want to talk to you about where we really can use technology. The first is how we learn sort of what they refer to as descriptive knowledge. These are facts, rules, principles, anything in a subject or a domain or a company. It's the stuff you kind of have to know in your head so that you can converse about it easily. Most of high school stuff fits into that category, and I refer to it as what and why knowledge. Then there's another knowledge, procedural knowledge, which is really the information and knowledge you need to be able to perform a specific task well. In companies, you might refer to this as know-how, your valuable intellectual property that gives you that competitive edge. It's less general and more job-dependent and very specific and detailed than descriptive knowledge might be. So maybe if you're a waiter in a restaurant, descriptive knowledge could be, the kind of meals you serve, the kind of restaurant it is, and the procedural knowledge could be how you serve customers, how the kitchen works, how you create the best customer experience. So if we look at that first category of descriptive knowledge, it really surprises me that in the 21st century, we're still struggling to embed basic conceptual and theoretical knowledge. We're still pushing people through long training workshops and leading to cognitive overload. When most of the stuff we actually learn in corporates or at school really isn't rocket science. It was really about creating an opportunity to reinforce and consolidate that learning, an opportunity to practice general information like what companies' visions and cultures and purposes are about, services and products offerings, business processes, theories and concepts that you learn in school. This is the kind of stuff that isn't rocket science to embed in people's minds. And if we leverage the power of personalized and adaptive learning, we could better cater for that kind of learning. We could deliver information in bite-sized chunks that we know our cognitive mind assimilates better. We're looking for shorter and sharper learning experiences that we can assimilate more effectively. In addition to that, these interactive questions are far more effective than trying to read information passively because we can retain it more effectively. Providing those ongoing short, sharp learning opportunities allows us to overcome that big problem called the forgetting curve. The next powerful thing is that adaptive learning allows you to focus on your own weak areas until you actually demonstrate accuracy and mastery, as opposed to just going from 1 to 20 or finishing an exercise and counting the time as valuable. You can now count your competency and mastery as valuable. Corrective feedback allows you to correct misconceptions right at the point when you actually have the problem, as opposed to waiting for feedback 2 days or 2 weeks later. And that ultimately improves your retention far higher than before. Essentially, it's about creating that closed feedback loop I mentioned before, an opportunity to reinforce and consolidate knowledge. The thing, though, is that descriptive knowledge still fits into kind of a book-smart area. And there's still another kind of knowledge, particularly that companies need. That leads to organizational know-how and expertise. The problem is that we've actually been applying some of that personalized and adaptive learning. And one of the things we found is that in a call center environment, when young people were actually selling financial services products, they had a higher sales conversion rate when they were trained using adaptive learning tools than if they'd just done a face-to-face workshop. Other studies in the US show that personalized and adaptive learning is 30 times cost-effective than any other of the approaches that they looked at. In this particular study, Professor Ye looked at 22 different approaches as to what could possibly improve learning achievement in schools. And they compared these approaches based on the time it takes to achieve that outcome, to get the learner to a certain level of proficiency in reading and numeracy and things like that, as well as the amount of money in billions of US dollars that it takes to implement that intervention. Basically, they looked at things like, what if we employed teachers with only master's degrees and not bachelor's degrees? What if we use teachers with 5 or more years experience? What if you had classrooms of 25 learners or less? What if we used digital textbooks and digital videos to deliver content? What if we used charter schools or voucher programs? And then they looked at what if we used personalized learning reinforcement. And they found that it was by far and away the most cost-effective way of learning and improving learner achievement. Really, from the difference in that graph, by far and away doesn't even cut it. It was indisputably better than any of the other interventions. Yet we're still not using this kind of learning in our schools and in the training workshops that deliver this kind of content. Once you've mastered a basic understanding of your domain, it leads you to the next level of expertise around know-how and how you build expertise to be able to apply it in your workplace. So even when you have a degree or you've been well-trained, it'll often take you a long time and lots of exposure before you can become an expert in that field in your organization. And if we're ever really to capture the demographic dividend on the continent, we need to figure out a way to leapfrog that sort of experience or sort of expertise gap that happens in companies. I hope there are some of you that are fans in The Matrix, because there's a scene where Trinity has to fly a helicopter to try and get away from the bad boys. And what they manage to do is that they telepathically program her brain to know how to fly this helicopter as if she were an expert. So I'm not saying technology can do that for our brains just yet, but we can get pretty close. If you landed in Tianjin in China today, for example, and I gave you an address and told you to try get there, and you maybe looked at some maps, you would probably not make it there at all because you had no real understanding of that city. But if I gave you a GPS, you could be guided at every turn and ultimately get to that address, assuming, of course, that the GPS lady is speaking English. The point is that the GPS in that instance can replace essentially your lack of contextual knowledge in that situation. It replaces your lack of experience and expertise so that you can behave as if you're an expert, even though you were not trained on that city. So what if we could apply that same kind of GPS intelligence or GPS logic inside organizations? Couldn't we capture organizational complexity so that we can embed those processes and complex decisions into a digital tool? We could take into consideration a company's products and systems and processes and ultimately design steps and methodologies that lead to best outcomes. They are always better solutions. And if we can capture organizational complexity in digital tools, we can avoid the situation where it takes years of experience to ultimately get it. I believe the kind of tools that do this are here already. Using real-time decision support tools, we're able to embed that kind of knowledge and expertise. Let's take a look at some possible examples in its training environment in sales. What typically happens when we do sales training is that we try to get our staff to remember 50 or 100 products, and that doesn't turn out very well because of the cognitive overload. So in the end, maybe if you're a financial advisor, you end up focusing on 2 or 3 or 5 because those are the ones you remember and know very well, and the rest you kind of have to forget about because it's too much to figure out. So you end up really selling what you want and what you know, not what the customer really needs at that point. We try to bridge that gap through mentorship and apprenticeships, and that isn't really that scalable, and the expert often teaches incorrectly in those environments. But what if we looked at a different situation, where call center agents selling financial services products could actually follow a real-time advisor that could prompt them to ask the right questions to accurately diagnose client needs, and therefore, thereafter recommend the right products and recognize any other needs that the customer might have to pick up cross-sale opportunities. The virtual advisor could be sitting on a desktop or mobile or a tablet and look something like this, and effectively guide the agent as if they were an expert, and do all the algorithms and calculations in the background to reach a best practice outcome that a sales expert might have reached in that situation. We could apply this in healthcare, for example. We already know that there's a huge limitation on the number of doctors and nurses on our continent. And we're trying to use healthcare workers and clinical associates to fill that gap, who have much less training than a doctor or a nurse. But if we armed them with a real-time guide or tool, we could be able to help them form better decisions and better diagnosis so that they can deal with what they can deal with and escalate the right issues to a doctor or a nurse to deal with. Because we know that if the doctor and nurse have to see everyone, they're unlikely to ever get there. So you see, this can apply in a range of areas. If you're a technician, and you would have typically needed years of experience to be able to see all the possible cases in your environment, how do we short-circuit that so that at any point in time, you have the best expertise at your fingertips to diagnose issues and fix them in real time? Or if you're in a professional environment or you're an auditor, how do we equip you with information to make the best, to follow your methodologies of your company or identify whether a conflict of interest has happened or any outcome like that? Effectively, we can reduce the time to competency for young people in particular to get them to productivity quicker and make them more employable. That's a powerful outcome for us. We can essentially try to mimic the way an expert would make a decision, where they apply complex decision-making logic and be able to diagnose, solve, and act on the right solutions, and make that best practice available to all employees who don't have that level of skill and don't have that level of experience. For Africa to really take its place or have its turn, really, as a global leader, we must leapfrog the skills and knowledge gap. And technology can be a key catalyst in that equation. I see a shift from a knowledge economy to an expertise economy. In the knowledge economy, we were putting documents together into flat files and PDFs and PowerPoint presentations and trying to share that. In an expertise economy, we have to capture advice and complex multidimensional decision-making logic. And that's what will help us get to a point where we can deliver better outcomes, because companies are asking for us to be able to draw the right links, make the right inferences, and reach the right decisions and conclusions based on bits of information. Now we can mimic that in real time with digital tools. The benefits are going to be significant as well. Now we don't have to try to get people to memorize everything, because we already know the limitations of our cognitive mind and what we can remember. We can also reduce the amount of days to train, because we're really needing all of those days to try to get people to remember everything. We can also apply and capture best practice decision-making so that we can avoid and limit costly decision errors. And if you're working in a mining environment, some bad choices could literally blow up in your face. Some of the case studies I've seen have delivered some great results already. In a financial services retail banking environment, financial advisors were equipped with a real-time client diagnostic and product recommendation tool that they could use in a conversation with clients on their tablets, including young people who had limited experience and exposure. And within 2 weeks, they could see a significant sales increase of 52% and a 20% increase in cross-sales. A large telecommunications call center was able to dramatically reduce the call center agent error, in fact, by 100%, simply because everyone could now follow best practice methodology. The implications of this for me are huge, because if we're going to be able to capture the demographic dividend, we have to be able to empower people with the right kind of tools to perform well in their environments. The impact on people is also powerful, because now we don't have to stress about, am I following the right methodologies? Am I doing the right thing? We live in highly regulated and complex compliance environments that performance anxiety is actually coming to be very high. Now people can leave that worry and focus on delivering a customer service that is deserving of that customer, and actually focus on providing care. This also helps young people with very little confidence to be able to deliver a service because they know they have the right backup all the way. When we look at the unemployment issue around the world, 35% of global employers say that they are struggling to find people with the right skills. My suspicion is that when a company says that they can't find the right skills, They're really saying that our environments are very complex, with multidimensional logic happening all the time, and it takes someone with lots of experience and lots of degrees to be able to figure out what's happening and cut through the clutter and figure out how to solve a problem. What if we could turn that situation on its head, and we could capture that complexity using all the subject matter experts in the organization to systemize these processes better? Couldn't we change this equation where we can change our historical concept of what it means to have the right skills and make it more available for everyone to be able to have the right skills in an organization? There are always better ways to do things, and as CIOs and executives in your organizations, you're in a tremendous position of power to be able to affect how your staff operate and how productive they become, as well as how you look at young, underskilled people if you can capacitate them better. The solutions are already out there, and it is within your realm and power to be able to make those changes. Education and learning and opportunities to develop yourself have always been important to me and my family in particular. My father would always tell me a story about my grandfather, a man of no formal education at all, but had profound wisdom. He said to my father, who would tend the cattle because it was the source of everything they had, wealth, food, sustenance, and he said to him, "Leave these cows. Something will happen to them, or someone will take them. Leave these cows and go and get education and skills and improve your own economic prospects." I believe that using technology, we can make that possible for people that were not as lucky as my father or me, and we're all in a position to do that today. I leave you with the words of Steve Jobs. Shake off this erroneous notion that life is there and you're just going to live in it, and we're just going to accept the plight of young people on this continent. Believe and decide that you can change it, you can improve it, you can make your mark upon it. Thank you.